The glow of my phone screen illuminated the dimly lit room as I settled into the couch, ready for a quiet evening of mindless scrolling. Social media updates, funny memes, and news articles provided a temporary escape from the demands of daily life. My fingers swiped effortlessly, lost in the digital world. Amidst the stream of content, a single image shattered my sense of normalcy. My eyes widened as I stared at the profile picture on the dating site. It couldn't be true. My heart raced, its rhythm erratic as if trying to keep pace with my racing thoughts. My husband, James, smiled back at me from the screen, the same smile that had captured my heart years ago. Disbelief crashed over me like a tidal wave. This wasn't some random stranger who resembled him. It was undeniably James. Panic gripped me, and I felt like I was falling into an abyss of uncertainty. My mind raced, struggling to catch up with the implications of what I was seeing. I clicked on the profile, my fingers trembling as I read through the details that seemed both alien and distressingly familiar. A chill spread through my body, despite the warmth of the room. Questions swirled in my mind like a storm. Why was he on a dating site? Was our marriage not what I thought it was? How could he betray the trust we had built over the years? My emotions were a jumble of shock, anger, and hurt. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, unsure of whether to confront the truth or retreat into the comfort of denial. The realization that my husband, the person I had shared my life with, might be seeking something outside our marriage sent a sharp pang through my heart. The foundations of my reality cracked, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty. As the clock ticked away, I closed the dating site tab, unable to process everything in that moment. My mind raced ahead, already contemplating the conversation that would inevitably come, the confrontation I couldn't avoid. Little did I know that this initial shock was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I believed about love, trust, and the complexity of human relationships. The days that followed the discovery were a haze of conflicting emotions and unanswered questions. Each interaction with James was tinged with an underlying tension that I struggled to hide. Our once familiar routines now felt like a facade, and every glance exchanged between us seemed fraught with unspoken words. Doubt became my constant companion. I found myself analyzing every past conversation, every shared moment, searching for signs that I had missed, memories that had once brought me joy now turned into puzzles, each piece fitting into a narrative I wasn't sure I wanted to acknowledge. It was as if a shadow had been cast over the life we had built together. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake night after night, replaying scenarios in my mind. The world around me seemed to blur, and I struggled to concentrate on even the simplest tasks. I withdrew from friends and family, unable to share my torment with anyone. The thought of admitting my fears out loud was too daunting, a confirmation of a reality I wasn't ready to fully accept. As the days turned into nights and back into days again, my thoughts vacillated between anger and sadness. How could he betray me like this? Was I not enough for him? Did he no longer find our life together fulfilling? The internal struggle became a torment, a weight that threatened to crush me. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself forever, that I couldn't live in this limbo of uncertainty. Yet the fear of what I might uncover held me back from confronting James. I wasn't ready to hear his explanations, his justifications, his potentially painful truths. I clung to the idea of the life we had before this discovery, grasping at the remnants of a reality that was slipping through my fingers. The doubt gnawed at me, eroding the trust I had placed in our relationship. It was a betrayal that reached far beyond the confines of the digital world. It had invaded the sanctity of our home and the intimacy we had shared. With each passing day, the weight of my emotions grew heavier, and I knew that I couldn't continue down this path of uncertainty. It was time to face the truth, whatever it may be, and decide how to navigate the storm that had unexpectedly descended upon our marriage. Sleepless nights turned into restless days, my mind consumed by the dilemma that had taken over my life. It was during one of those sleep-deprived, contemplative moments that a daring idea began to form in my mind, an idea that was audacious, risky, and yet oddly enticing. What if I could uncover more about James's intentions? What if I could gauge whether this online presence was merely curiosity or something more? The thought of confronting him directly was still too intimidating, but the idea of venturing into the digital realm to confront this mystery took root within me. With trembling fingers, I unlocked my phone and reopened the dating sites page that had unveiled James's secret. This time, however, I wasn't just a bystander. I was an active participant. My heart raced as I navigated through the site's registration process, my palms growing clammy with a mix of anticipation and unease. Creating a new identity felt surreal, like stepping into an alternate reality. I hesitated for a moment before selecting a random photo from the depths of the internet, ensuring that it bore no resemblance to me or anyone I knew. As I entered details for my new persona, I felt a sense of detachment, as if I was crafting a character for a story rather than engaging in real-life subterfuge. The persona I created was a stark contrast to myself. Her name was Emma, outgoing, adventurous, a lover of thrills and spontaneity. She enjoyed hiking, traveling to exotic locations, and daring escapades that had never held much allure for me. Crafting this persona felt both thrilling and unsettling, like donning a mask to hide my true intentions. As I meticulously fleshed out Emma's profile, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. What I was doing was deceptive, a breach of trust in its own right, but the need for answers, for a glimpse into James's mind, overshadowed those feelings. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about my own peace of mind, my understanding of the reality we shared. With a deep breath, I clicked the Assav button. Emma's profile was now active, and a wave of uncertainty washed over me. What if he didn't respond? What if he saw through my ruse? What if this endeavor only led to further heartache? The questions were endless, but the urge to uncover the truth was stronger. I navigated back to James's profile and composed a carefully crafted message. "Hey there, handsome," I typed, my fingers hovering over the keyboard before finally pressing the send button. It was a moment of no return, a leap into a web of lies and deceit, all in pursuit of a truth I desperately needed. As the message disappeared into the digital abyss, I felt a mix of anticipation, guilt, and an odd sense of empowerment. Little did I know that this message would set off a chain of events that would forever alter the course of our relationship. The days that followed the sending of that initial message were a curious blend of anticipation and anxiety. Every time I picked up my phone, I couldn't help but check for a response from James's dating profile. The screen remained stubbornly empty, a stark reminder of the divide between the person I once knew and the person who now existed within the confines of a digital identity named Emma. Creating Emma had been an exercise in imagination, a departure from my own reality. I had chosen a photo that was strikingly different from my own appearance, ensuring that there was no chance of recognition. Her vibrant smile and adventurous gaze stared back at me from the screen, a stranger in the form of a carefully selected image. As I continued to build Emma's profile, I was struck by the stark contrasts between us. Emma was an embodiment of the qualities I often wished I possessed: boldness, spontaneity, a fearless pursuit of adventure. In crafting her preferences and interests, I had painted a picture of someone who reveled in the unknown, a stark departure from my own comfort-seeking tendencies. But it wasn't just Emma's interests that diverged from my reality. It was her words, her tone, the way she expressed herself. I deliberately chose phrases and language that felt foreign to me, embodying the persona of someone I barely recognized. It was like stepping into an elaborate costume, one that shielded me from my own emotions, while allowing me to explore a side of myself that had long remained dormant. Each message I exchanged with James as Emma was an exercise in duality. On one hand, I was gaining insights into his thoughts and feelings that I had never accessed before. Our conversations were candid, intimate, as if the barrier of the screen allowed him to open up in ways that our day-to-day interactions never had. But on the other hand, I was perpetuating a lie, entangling myself in a web of deceit that grew more intricate with each passing message. The deeper our conversations grew, the more conflicted I felt. It was as if I was forging a connection with James that was both genuine and fabricated, a paradox that weighed heavily on my conscience. Emma's presence in my life became a constant reminder of the chasm that had formed between the reality I sought and the reality I had unwittingly uncovered. As I typed out responses and engaged in increasingly personal conversations, I found myself questioning the authenticity of my own emotions. Was I responding as myself, as Emma, or some blurred combination of the two? The boundaries between truth and fiction were becoming increasingly hazy, and I knew that the time was rapidly approaching when I would have to confront James with the truth, regardless of the consequences. Days turned into weeks as I navigated the delicate dance of maintaining the facade I'd created as Emma. Each message sent and received felt like a step deeper into a world that was simultaneously thrilling and unnerving. Conversations flowed with a fluidity that surprised me, revealing aspects of James that I had never seen before, his hopes, his dreams, his fears. Despite the ruse I had woven, I couldn't help but feel a strange connection forming between us. Emma's adventurous persona seemed to draw out a side of James that had remained hidden beneath the surface. As we shared stories, jokes, and aspirations, I found myself captivated by this newfound intimacy. It was as if we were rediscovering each other, shedding the layers of routine that had settled over our marriage. But the more engaged I became in these conversations, the more guilt gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. The initial intention of uncovering James's intentions had evolved into something more complex, a genuine connection built on a foundation of deception. The weight of that contradiction pressed down on me, and I began to question whether I was doing more harm than good. One evening, as I sat in front of my computer screen, James's reply landed in my inbox with a soft chime. My heart skipped a beat as I opened the message, the words filling the screen in a familiar digital font. His response was warm, playful, and surprisingly earnest. The emotions he expressed resonated deeply, and I felt a pang of guilt for the tangled web I had woven. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I formulated my reply. The truth loomed over me, a storm cloud that I could no longer ignore. It was time to unveil the secret I had harbored, to break down the walls of deception and confront the reality that had driven me to this point. Taking a deep breath, I typed out my confession. James, I need to tell you something. I'm not who you think I am. My name isn't Emma, and photo you've seen isn't really me. I'm someone you know. I've been reaching out to you under a false identity. The cursor blinked, a heartbeat of uncertainty before I pressed the SN button. A wave of anxiety surged through me as I watched the message disappear into the digital void. My heart raced, my palms grew sweaty, and a whirlwind of thoughts swept through my mind. What would he say? How would he react to the revelation that had been building beneath the surface of our conversations? As I waited for his response, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of anticipation and dread. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The foundation of our connection, shaky as it was, had been built on lies, and I was bracing myself for the consequences that would inevitably follow. Little did I know that the ensuing revelations and emotions would challenge the very core of who we were, forcing us to confront the complexities of love, trust, and the uncharted territory of our future together. The aftermath of my confession was a maelstrom of emotions that swept us both into uncharted territory. The seconds stretched into minutes as I anxiously awaited James's response, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and regret. I had peeled back the layers of my deception, revealing a truth that I couldn't undo. His reply finally arrived, and I read his words with a mixture of trepidation and relief. He admitted to feeling a mixture of shock, confusion, and even a hint of betrayal. The depth of my deceit had caught him off guard, and he struggled to comprehend the reasons behind my actions. Our subsequent conversations became a tightrope walk, navigating the delicate balance between confronting my deception and addressing the revelations that had emerged from our interactions as Emma. He expressed a mix of anger and understanding, grappling with the emotional complexity of the situation. I, too, was forced to confront the reality that our connection as Emma was genuine, even if the circumstances that had forged it were flawed. As days turned into weeks, the boundary between truth and fiction grew increasingly blurred. It became harder to differentiate between the feelings I had shared as Emma and those I harbored as myself. Our conversations deepened, moving beyond the initial shock and into the intricacies of our relationship. We spoke of hopes, fears, and desires, peeling back layers of vulnerability that had been buried beneath the surface of our everyday interactions. It was during one of these conversations that I found myself confronted with a paradox. The more we opened up to each other, the more I realized that our marriage had been built on a foundation of comfort rather than connection. We had grown complacent in our routines, allowing the spark that had ignited our relationship to dwindle over time. Emma's presence had rekindled a sense of excitement and intimacy that had long been absent, leading us down a path of self-discovery that was as liberating as it was painful. The emotional turmoil intensified as the truth we had both been avoiding began to crystallize. My deception had catalyzed a transformation, not just within our relationship, but within ourselves. James admitted that he had joined the dating site out of curiosity, a longing for something more that he hadn't been able to put into words. Emma had been the catalyst that forced us to confront the distance that had grown between us. But as our connection deepened, the guilt grew heavier. I struggled to reconcile the fact that our newfound intimacy was rooted in a lie. The emotional turmoil of maintaining the facade had taken its toll, and I longed for a way to untangle the web I had woven. The lines between my identity and Emma's had become blurred, and I grappled with the realization that I was no longer sure where one ended and the other began. The journey of self-discovery, tangled emotions, and uncertain truths had brought us to a precipice. The time had come to confront the crossroads we faced, to either rebuild our marriage on the foundation of this newfound intimacy or face the stark reality of our differences. The path ahead was as uncertain as the emotions that had brought us to this point, and the choices we made would determine the fate of our relationship. The revelation of our tangled emotions and the intricate web of deception had brought us to a pivotal moment in our relationship. The air between us was charged with a mixture of vulnerability, regret, and the yearning for resolution. We had journeyed through uncharted emotional territory, and now the time had come to confront the truth head-on. A quiet tension hung in the air as I suggested that we meet in person to discuss everything. It was a decision driven by the need for closure, for a chance to look each other in the eyes and lay bare our emotions without the veil of digital communication. James agreed, and we chose a neutral location for our conversation, a place that held no memories, no biases, just a space where we could openly communicate. As the day of our meeting approached, my nerves intensified. The prospect of facing James in person, of addressing the complex emotions that had surfaced, was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. I wrestled with a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, guilt for my deception, hope for a renewed connection, and fear of what our conversation might uncover. The appointed day arrived, and I found myself standing outside the cafe we had chosen. My heart pounded as I waited for James to arrive, my thoughts racing with 1,000 possible scenarios. When he finally appeared, his expression a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, I felt a pang of both familiarity and distance. The man I had shared my life with was now a stranger in some sense, a person who had been both the subject of my curiosity and the recipient of my emotional turmoil. As we settled into our seats and the conversation began, the words flowed hesitantly at first. There was an unspoken acknowledgement of the messiness of the situation, an understanding that this was a journey of vulnerability and self-discovery for both of us. I admitted to the depth of my guilt, the layers of my own motivations that had driven me to create Emma. James, in turn, shared the complexity of his feelings, his yearning for something more in our marriage that he hadn't been able to articulate. The conversation was raw, emotional, and at times painful. We laid our truths bare, peeling back the layers of our emotions to reveal the vulnerabilities beneath. The weight of the deception was heavy, and the choices we had made were dissected and examined under the harsh light of reality. There were tears, there were accusations, but there was also an underlying determination to confront the issues that had long been buried beneath the surface. As we spoke, a shared understanding began to emerge. Our relationship wasn't defined solely by the deception or the emotions that had surfaced during our conversations as Emma. It was a complex tapestry woven from years of shared experiences, triumphs, and failures. We acknowledged the complacency that had settled in, the spark that had dimmed, and the realization that we both wanted more from our marriage. By the end of our conversation, a tentative sense of resolution began to take shape. We understood that rebuilding our connection would require time, effort, and a willingness to be honest about our needs and desires. The foundation had been shaken, but it wasn't irreparable. The emotional journey we had embarked upon from the discover to the confrontation had opened our eyes to the fractures in our relationship, but it had also provided a path forward. As we parted ways that day, there was a shared commitment to face the challenges ahead, to rebuild the trust that had been eroded, and to rediscover the intimacy that had once defined us. The road ahead was uncertain, but we were no longer walking it in the shadows of deception. The confrontation had beckoned us to the surface, exposing our vulnerabilities and allowing us to begin the process of healing and renewal. The aftermath of our candid conversation brought a mixture of relief and trepidation. The truths we had shared had opened wounds, but they had also laid the groundwork for healing and growth. It was as if the storm that had been brewing beneath the surface had finally broken, washing away the debris of deception and complacency. In the days that followed our meeting, James and I found ourselves navigating the uncharted waters of rebuilding trust. We embraced a newfound transparency, discussing our hopes, fears, and aspirations with a level of honesty that we had never before achieved. The emotional walls we had built over time began to crumble, replaced by a desire to truly understand and support each other. The journey wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt when the weight of our past mistakes threatened to pull us back into old patterns. Yet with each stumble, we reaffirmed our commitment to face these challenges head on. We sought professional guidance, engaging in couples therapy to help us navigate the complexities of rebuilding our marriage. Conversations that had once been avoided now became essential. We delved into the underlying reasons for James's presence on the dating site and the emotions that had driven me to create Emma. We acknowledged the flaws in our communication and our assumptions about each other. With time, the emotional distance that had grown between us began to narrow, replaced by a renewed sense of connection and intimacy. But the process was far from easy. There were moments of discomfort, of revisiting painful truths and addressing deep-seated issues. Yet there were also moments of joy, of rediscovering the reasons we had fallen in love in the first place. Through this process, we learned to listen, to empathize, and to validate each other's experiences. We learned that love wasn't just a static feeling, but an active choice we made every day. As weeks turned into months, our efforts began to bear fruit. The connection we had uncovered as Emma merged with the connection we had built over years of shared experiences. It was a blend of the old and the new, a relationship that had weathered a storm and emerged stronger on the other side. We rediscovered the spark that had drawn us together, nurturing it with intention and understanding. In time, we found ourselves not just healing, but thriving. The confrontation that had once felt like a daunting abyss had become a turning point in our journey. Our marriage had transformed from a place of complacency to a space of growth, exploration, and mutual support. It wasn't without scars, but those scars were a testament to our resilience and the love we were willing to fight for. The final chapter of our story wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. We had faced deception, confronted truths, and embraced vulnerability. We had stumbled and risen, stumbled again, and learned to dance through life's challenges hand in hand. The journey from a curious discovery to an intimate confrontation had transformed our marriage into something deeper and more profound than we could have ever imagined. And as we stood on the brink of the future, we did so with a renewed sense of hope, a commitment to growth, and an unbreakable bond forged through the fire of our shared experience.